I do want to thank the NRB for their leadership and being at the forefront of a nefarious effort to silence Christian speech, to silence conservative speech online. And I really believe that the Internet Freedom Watch is one of the most important initiatives of NRB. That's because we knew the left would not stop after weakening freedom of religion, our first freedom. They have declared war on free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, and as we have seen in recent days, the right to bear arms. Now, at this time, as our panel begins to assemble, I'd like for you to look at the monitors on either side of the podium for a special message from Fcc Chairman Ajit Pi.
Greetings from Washington, and thank you for this opportunity to address NRB's annual convention. I'd like to begin my message by quoting a passage from our Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. The principles of free expression and freedom of religion, as enshrined in the First Amendment, rest at the foundation of our great nation. And it is the defense of these principles that gave rise to your organization. NRB was founded in the 1940s in response to the threat of censorship of evangelical radio ministries. Just as the virtue of free expression is timeless, so it appears is the fight to defend it. In recent years, we've seen warning signs that our nation's commitment to freedom of speech is beginning to unravel. A Pew survey found that 40% of millennials, 40%, believe that the government should be able to bar certain individuals from making offensive statements. We've seen this sentiment play out on college campuses, where too many students believe that views perceived as unpopular or offensive should be silenced. Too often today, the mantra seems to be, free speech for me, but not for thee. The newest and most important battlefield in the fight for free speech is the internet. Despite vows from powerful online platforms that they will stay true to internet freedom and openness, we have seen them block or discriminate against lawful content they don't like. Whether it's online or over the airwaves, we need to reaffirm our nation's commitment to free expression. That's why I haven't been afraid to call out censorship when I see it. I pledge to you today that I will continue to fight for your right to have your voices heard.
Well, it's an honor to be moderating this panel. You know, back in 2013, I was labeled the bad boy of Facebook. I was banned for writing and waxing poetically about Bill Gaither, Paula Deen, and Cracker Barrel rocking chairs. And they said such conversations flew in the face of Facebook's community standards. So it's an honor to be a part of this wonderful group that NRB has assembled. Each of our panelists has been on the forefront and on the front lines of this fight to secure our constitutional rights. So would you please welcome the president of the Susan B. Anthony List, Marjorie Dannenfelser, from Salem Talk Radio, Larry Elder and Dennis Prager, and the president of the Family Research Council, Tony Perkins. Yes, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. All right, panel, this is how things are going to operate. We're going to let each of you have a 5-minute opening statement. Then we're going to have sort of a rapid-fire free-for-all where we will ask questions, and if you guys want to go after each other, feel free to do that. And I believe we are going to start with Dennis Prager. Now, by the way, Dennis, I understand you have an obligation. You've got to talk on the radio. So if you walk out of here, it's not because we've offended you or said something inappropriate.
Right, you might have offended me, but that's beside the point.
Okay, well, that works.
But I just have to, forgive me, I'll have to leave because I have my national show at 11, correct? Yes, Central Time, 11. So, hi everybody, thank you for having me. I can speak to this issue quite directly because I am the founder of Prager University, which is the largest maker of conservative videos in the world. And thank you. We had 600 million views last year, and we're aiming for 1 billion. The good news, and it is very good news, the majority of those, in other words, 65% of those who watch our videos, they're 5-minute videos, are under 35 years of age. So the word has gotten out that we are a force because we are changing minds. Our task is to change minds. It is to give intellectual ammunition to those on our side and to challenge those in the middle and those who are on the other side, and especially young people, but not only young people. Everybody matters. Everybody is in God's image. As a result, we have become the focus of some attention on the left, and the worst is as follows. We have 300 videos up. We put out one every week, sometimes 2 a week. YouTube, which is owned by Google, has put 40 of our videos on their restricted list. Restricted in YouTube means cannot be seen in any home that filters out pornography and gratuitous violence, cannot be seen in any library, and cannot be seen in any educational institution, and is demonetized. No ads can appear, so as to make sure that we cannot make money. All of our videos are free, and one of the ways in which we raise money is through the ad. We don't sell ads, but there are ads on YouTube. So that is what they have done to 40 of our videos at YouTube, which is owned again by Google. Now, let me give you an example of some of the things that they find to be on the level of pornography and gratuitous violence. Victor Davis Hanson, Why America Fought in Korea. If you know Victor Davis Hanson, you are shaking your head. There's no more gentle soul on earth. To lump him and that subject with pornography is just absurd. For a while, I did a video. I only make 10% of our videos. 90% are made by others. But among those that I made were a series of 11 videos on the 10 Commandments. My video on Thou Shalt Not Kill was placed on the restricted list. Do you understand the absurdity of what we're talking about? A video saying God doesn't want you to murder was lumped in with pornography on Google. They immediately put our video on Planned Parenthood, which came out 2 weeks ago. It was within 2 hours on the restricted list. However, very interestingly, the next day it was removed from the restricted list, and I am certain why. We have sued Google, and the reason, thank you. It is worthy of your cheers and support. We were approached by former Governor Pete Wilson of California, who is a very, very big fan of my work, I'm honored to say, and of Prager University. And he said, my law firm wants to represent you in fighting what Google/YouTube is doing to you. And it was really his idea, and indeed it is his prestigious law firm which is leading. We're paying something, and we're raising funds for that. Be that as it may, it will be adjudicated in the first court a month from now. The case is very simple. There is a fraudulent aspect to what Google represents itself to be. It says we are an open forum. They're not. They're a left-wing forum. If our lawsuit fails, what will happen is they will be given governmental, or I should say judicial sanction to make the internet what the university has become. A world closed off to non-left-wing, even closed off to liberal thought. And I want to make one quick point that is somewhat tangential but critical, and that is that you must always, in making these arguments, distinguish between liberal and left. There are liberals on our side. Steven Pinker, professor, big liberal, agnostic or atheist at Harvard, just said, the left is making the university a place of ridicule. He said that. Alan Dershowitz, lifelong liberal, Hillary Clinton supporter, said to me in filming the film I'm making with Adam Carolla, No Safe Spaces, in his apartment in New York City 2 months ago, I have much more fear as a liberal of the left than I do of the right. The left is the antithesis of liberalism and the antithesis of conservatism. That is what needs to be made known. Google is left. Liberals allow free speech. Leftists never did. Since Lenin until Google, it hasn't. That is how big this lawsuit is, not because I'm in it. I didn't want to be in it, but it has to prevail. But please understand, the internet will be Berkeley if they are allowed by judges to continue what they're doing. Thank you.
Marjorie, opening statement.
First, I have a question of you, Dennis. When our panel got up to walk out here, I heard the sounding of the shofar. What do you think that is all? What do you think that means for our panel?
What do I think about the blowing of the shofar?
As we walked out, I heard
thought it was awesome. I have to say, the Jews, I am a religious Jew. Jews blow the shofar, the ram's horn, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Well, really Rosh Hashanah just at the very end of Yom Kippur. So just on the New Year, it's to sound the alarm to the human being to repent. And it ushers in the 10 days of penitence that end up in the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. But it is funny because it's also Purim. And I thought, wow, to hear the shofar on the holiday of Purim, maybe they got the calendar wrong. On the other hand, you could hear it any time. I'll tell you what I thought. I'm sorry, I'm going to take 30 seconds and then shut up. I'll tell you what I thought.
I asked.
Because it's emotional. I thought this Jew has his greatest friends among these Christians.
Amen.
That's what I thought.
Well said.
I am really glad I asked that question. We can certainly consider this room in this panel, absolutely that, Dennis, and also the sounding of the shofar, I hope now means that we can be a part of repentance on the part of the nation for shutting down the voice of good people, people of faith, and people in the life movement. I want to address just for a second the life movement piece of this, which is huge because it is central to all rights, of course. And I want to put it in context first. Every single successful human rights movement in the history of our nation depended upon, first of all, a really good, sound, attractive argument about human rights. And then it depended upon spheres of influence in which it could flourish, on which that argument could be built, taken directly to the people so that those people could pass laws that would save the lives and the vocations and the livelihoods of the people who were victimized. The pictures that you see on the screen are pictures that were part of that argument. The whipping of slaves during the time of slavery. Let me look again. The children who are used as commodities in industry, just like they were a piece of machinery until the argument was built and made that they should not be used as such. Beyond that, in the civil rights movement, the hosing down of African Americans in order to shut them up so that they did not speak out for their rights. There's a history of trying to shut down, and there's a history of human rights heroes trying to build the argument and thrive. And there's some spheres of influence where we can do this, or where any rights movement can operate. It can operate within academia, it can operate within the traditional media, it can operate within entertainment industry, and also politics. I think the first three that I named, we can all say that the pro-life movement is not necessarily thriving within academia, except for the Dennis Prager U. It's not thriving within traditional media, and is not thriving, with some good exceptions, in the entertainment industry. But the popular movement that the pro-life movement is, the populist movement that the pro-life movement is, depends upon social media in order to take the argument directly over the heads of all those other three, directly to the people, to make the argument about the death of boys and girls, 3,000 at least every single day. To shut that down means to shut down the core of our Constitution and our founding documents. It simply cannot happen, and it is. So I want to just give you, so the consequences are pretty horrendous for our nation, obviously. I'm just going to give you a few examples. Marcia did a beautiful job of explaining the attempted shutting down of her announcement to run for public office in her home state that contained language that Twitter did not appreciate. It contained the truth about the commodification of human beings, the sale of their body parts that Planned Parenthood was guilty of, that she has direct evidence of. They didn't like that. So they shut her down for a little while. A little while matters, though, because as we know, justice delayed is justice denied. I didn't say that. Gladstone said that, and so did Martin Luther King said that. Justice delayed is justice denied. So that's a great example that Marcia brought up, and there are a few more. We were not surprised when we saw that on Marcia's part, because we ourselves at the Susan B. Anthony list have been rallying around the same thing. Let me just tell you who the next person who was censored, and that is Mother Teresa. I tweeted this image out, and my eyes are so bad I can't read it on the screen, but we were imagining a day without abortion, what it would look like. We thought this tweet communicated that very well. Abortion is profoundly anti-woman. 3/4 of its victims are women, half the babies, and all of the mothers. That was shut down, and I want you to, and this was in reaction to this idea that the Planned Parenthood had and the Women's March movement, the hashtag, what would it be, women without women for a day, which maybe a lot of these guys on the panel can envision sometimes, might not be so bad. But I want you to...
Sweet mercy.
You know, goes both ways. But let me just tell you the reason, the policy under which Mother Teresa was struck down. It violated their health and pharmaceutical products and services policy. Let me read that again. The health and pharmaceutical products and services policy at Twitter. Do you see any health products or pharmaceutical services being sold by Mother Teresa? No, she's telling a fundamental truth. Let's go to the next one. And then just a couple of tweets that I just felt were on my heart that day. Let's envision a day without abortionists. And then the next one, another. Every time I tweeted this, they took it down. And that then there was an online campaign to convince our members of Congress and embolden our friends in Congress to defund Planned Parenthood. So this was a tweet for Mark Meadows in support of his position to very simply lobby and support members of Congress in saying defund Planned Parenthood. That was taken down. All these were taken down under that same absurd policy. What that absurd policy really is we don't like what you're talking about and we're going to take you down. So let's go to the next one and show that when the other side does the same exact thing, almost the equivalent language on the other side of the debate that same day, of course it's fine, because they like that one. It's pretty simple. We have examples from a lot of our allies as well. The Roe versus Wade movie, Facebook ad was taken down. The Human Coalition app that supports pregnancy care centers, that was taken down. Our friend and musical artist Joyce Bartholomew had a beautiful song called "What's Your Name?" It was a song to an unborn child. That was taken down. In many moments, these were restored. Not all of them. These posts were restored. But again, the idea that somehow there was a policy that would have required that they be taken down was absurd. Finally, a friend of ours at Susan B. Anthony list posted this, which was put behind a paywall, and it was labeled graphic content cannot be revealed. This graphic content is what you and I were at a certain stage in our lives, a beautiful graphic of who we are at a certain point in life. So I guess my closing piece here to Todd is to say that one thing that we ought to be clear on here, and I hope we talk about today, is that we must band together, whether in lawsuits or in the public forum in communicating loudly to companies like Twitter and Google. We must band together. We can never think to ourselves, well, it's sort of their corporate, it's their own companies that they can do what they want. No, the consequences to the restoration and the preservation of our rights are too high. The consequences are too much. One final thing that I would mention is that the Susan B. Anthony list was censored in putting up billboards a few years ago in an election. And we went through a long case that went to the Supreme Court and back, which we finally won. We said that a congressman had voted for taxpayer funding of abortion. It really hurt his feelings, and he was defeated, and he really didn't like it, so he sued us under a law in Ohio. That law that said you can't lie in election has now been stricken from the books. And that is because we and a few other organizations and supporters who funded that effort across the country said that our political voices must be allowed to flourish, especially when we're shut down in all these other spheres of influence. And I would say that we should get used to doing that over and over and over again together. Thanks so much.
Larry Elder.
Let me give you a quote, and as you think about who made this quote, I'll tell you a story. Quote, "The left, as a general rule, doesn't want to hear thoughtful disagreement," end of quote. The New York Times hired Bret Stephens to write a regular column for them. Bret Stephens is a columnist with the Wall Street Journal, a never-Trumper, which is why I believe they hired him. That's the kind of conservative the New York Times hires. But his first column was a column in which he was skeptical about climate change. Didn't denounce it, but said he was skeptical about the science behind it. A bunch of people called the New York Times and canceled their subscriptions. The executive editor of the New York Times, the guy who runs the paper, said in response to the avalanche of people who were critical of him, accusing him of selling out the paper by hiring this man, was at a forum kind of like this, and he said, and I quote, "The left, as a general rule, does not want to hear thoughtful disagreement," end of quote. This is the executive editor of the New York Times admitting that his side does not want to hear what anybody else has to say. During the 2008 election, the Washington Post had an ombudsperson, Deborah Howell, and she honestly wrote 2 articles about the paper's coverage of the election between Obama and McCain. And she said, on the front page of the Washington Post were more stories about Obama than McCain, more favorable stories about Obama than McCain, more photographs of Obama than McCain, more positive photographs of Obama than McCain. She wrote another piece in which she said the same thing. It so ticked off one of the editors of the Washington Post, he said publicly, "We're not garment makers. We're trying to put out a paper that people want to buy," end of quote. At least he was honest. What about all this, we publish all the news that's fit to print? Nonsense. That's New York Times. It's fascinating. Executive editor named Keller, New York Times, also several years ago admitted that our newspaper does have a left-wing sensibility. We are a progressive newspaper. We're trying to sell our newspaper to people that have that same kind of sensibility, end of quote. Again, at least he was honest. He didn't say we're doing all the news that's fit to print, which is the nonsense motto of the New York Times. At least he was honest. That's the battle that we're up against. Reporters are overwhelmingly left-wing. I think the Pew Research recently said about 7% of reporters self-describe as Republicans. 93% describe themselves as something other than that. This is what we're up against. Overwhelmingly, they take a point of view that's opposite the point of view that we have, and the problem is not just bias. It's that they perceive us not just to be wrong, but to be evil, to be corrupt. There's something fundamentally wrong with us. Our position on the other side is that these guys are wrong. Perhaps they're educated. We can educate them. We can reform them. But we don't think that they're evil. The left thinks that people who believe in God, that believe in the Constitution, that believe in the Second Amendment, have fundamental moral problems. That's what we're up against.
Well said. Well said. Tony Perkins, just yesterday, YouTube announced and they admitted they mistakenly took down a number of conservative channels. They did that, it was their mistake. Like Prager, a number of conservative YouTube channels, mine included, have been defunded. There was a Baptist minister in Georgia, a Southern Baptist minister. His sermon was removed because he said something about Islam in his sermon. We've seen Catholics that have come under fire that have been banned from Facebook. This is a clear and present danger, Tony.
Without question, Todd. In speaking of YouTube and Google, it was reported earlier this week that we've known for a while that they have these flaggers, these people that look at the content of what's on here, and rather than and these folks have all been undisclosed. They have to sign these non-disclosures. Nobody can really know who they are. They probably sit in someone's basement in their pajamas doing this, but who knows? But they found out, it was revealed this week that one of those individuals, at least one, is a part of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, I want to just I want to talk process for just a moment, because we often think we tend to think the best of everyone and everything. We're optimistic. We really don't have room for pessimism. Well, there's some room for pessimism here. There is a organized, planned effort going on here. This stuff is not happening randomly. And if you've not ever read Rules for Radicals, I think you should really read that by Saul Alinsky. You've heard a lot about it, but if you haven't read it, you should, because it's still the playbook of the left. It is to marginalize, intimidate for the purpose of silencing. I mentioned the Southern Poverty Law Center as being one of those groups that is being used by Google to flag material on YouTube that's being taken down. Well, we've had quite a bit of interaction with the Southern Poverty Law Center, an anti-Christian organization from down south that used to do good work when it came to civil rights, but they have now taken up the banner of the LGBTQ XYZ agenda, and they are seeking to silence anyone who disagrees with them on policy issues. We know them because they have targeted our organization as a hate group, which resulted in a gunman coming into our building using their hate map and shooting one of our employees. They also tagged Steve Scalise as an extremist who was also attacked and shot. We've seen this from Ben Carson has been on their list. There's about 40 different Christian organizations that have a biblical view of marriage that have been listed as hate groups. Well, that criteria now is being used by other leftist organizations. You think, well, that's fine, I don't have to contend with the left. Well, let me give you an example of what we dealt with just earlier this year. An organization called Guidestar. Some of you might be familiar with that organization. It is a self-proclaimed neutral organization which rates nonprofits on items like transparency and financial dealings. It puts its seal of approval on nonprofits when many donors look to this entity as a guide for where they give their money. Well, earlier in June of 2017, while our organization had a great rating in terms of transparency, all of a sudden we saw that organizations labeled by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups had a special banner put on their sites as a hate group, which then triggered many employer-driven contribution systems to then stop giving through that system because of the Guidestar rating. Well, we reached out several times to Guidestar. In fact, the CEO visited our office. We met with him, showed him the bullet holes in our wall that are still there, that were inspired by the SPLC shooting, but they didn't budge. Well, we did a little more digging, found out that the Guidestar CEO, Jacob Harold, is a former employee of Greenpeace. And the Rainforest Action Network was a host for NARAL Pro-Choice DC Men's event in 2014. He blogged for the Huffington Post. He donated to the Obama campaign in 2011 before joining Guidestar. His wife is also a pro-abortion advocate. And better yet, Harold tweeted a picture of himself at the Women's March in January of last year, holding a protest sign obviously directed against President Trump. Does the left play fair? Absolutely not. And the idea that they are saying that their objective is absolutely not true. They are going after conservative organizations and conservative individuals to intimidate them if they can't intimidate them. They want to marginalize them for the purpose of silencing them. Now, we fought with Guidestar and ended up, we got those labels removed from Guidestar. But folks, if we don't use every tool available to push back on the left's intent of silencing Christian broadcasters and conservative broadcasters, we are going to wake up one day and our free speech in America is going to be gone. It is time to roll up our sleeves and fight for the first freedom that we as Americans enjoy.
I'd like to ask Dennis a question. Dennis, as you know, my mom was a lifelong Democrat. However, in part because of my influence, she voted twice for Reagan and twice for George W. Bush, but she never changed her registration. My brother Kirk is a registered Democrat. Voted twice for Reagan, twice for George W. Bush, won't change his registration. When you had that conversation with Alan Dershowitz, and he told you that he was more fearful of his tribe than the right-wingers, did you ask him why he stayed in that tribe, why he remained a Democrat?
Oh, I'm smiling. Is this on? Yeah? I'm smiling because I've had three dialogues publicly with Alan Dershowitz, Miami, Los Angeles, and New York City, and I asked him that exact question each time. At this point, however, I actually don't want him to become a Republican. He is infinitely more valuable to us as a liberal Democrat. So it reminds me, I'm taking a risk telling you this, but we're all adults, and I think whatever your feelings, truth is very powerful, and truth sets you free, my favorite line from the New Testament. A very prominent evangelical said to me, after a very long theological conversation, he said, you know, Dennis, the truth is, of course, we would love you to come to Christ, but you're infinitely more valuable to us as a Jew. So, in that sense, I would love Dershowitz to come to the Republican Party, but he's infinitely more valuable to us as a Democrat. The answer to answer you is, he doesn't, his answer is, oh, well, I still believe in the essential Democratic Party liberal positions that I grew up with, and then he goes through the litany, all of which, of course, we affirm. That's the joke. There wasn't one thing on the list that we don't affirm as conservatives. Here is the irony. Conservatives are the protectors of liberalism today. We don't have a problem with others with different values. We have a problem, but we don't have a problem hearing them. We have at Prager University made videos with gays who have said on our video, like Dave Rubin, who have said, I am so much more better treated. I'm a liberal and I'm gay and I'm so much better treated by conservatives than by leftists. He's on record. He is not the only one. A guy wrote the son of a former congressman, big liberal Democrat in California, wrote the same thing. It was harder to come out to his family as a Republican than it was to come out among Republicans as gay. We are the open-minded. They are the closed-minded. This has to be registered each time. He remains, to answer you totally directly, my theory, it is an emotional commitment. I honor that. I understand it. That's fine with me. But there is no intellectual reason for someone who believes in liberalism today to support the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a left-wing party. It may have once been liberal. Listen, Franklin Roosevelt, who is the adored man of Democratic history, of the Democratic Party's history, Franklin Roosevelt spoke regularly about protecting Western civilization and Christian civilization. His words, when President Trump didn't say Christian civilization, just said Western civilization in his speech in Warsaw last year, the New York Times editorialized that he was speaking on behalf of white supremacy. The entire left dismissed a call to protect Western civilization as a dog whistle to white supremacy. That's how bad it is.
I want to open up this question to the panel. One of the arguments that I get a lot at Fox News, liberals, the lefties will write in, and they'll say, "What right do you have to tell Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Google? What right do you have to tell them what they have to put content on their pages?" Somebody want to take that one?
I'm going to have to leave in 10 minutes, so forgive me. I really don't. I love listening to you folks. There are a number of answers to that. First, there are legal precedents. If you claim to be a conduit for all views and you are not, there are judicial rulings against that. Number two, I would consider it a victory if in our courtroom adversarial positions, Google and YouTube announce, okay, it's true, we are not a conduit for views on the internet. We are essentially a conduit for left-wing views on the internet. That too would be a victory. It's the fraud that gets me. Their totalitarianism is given. All leftists since Lenin have been totalitarian. There is no non-totalitarian leftist in history. I studied communism at the Russian Institute under Zbigniew Brzezinski. My life's work has been studying the left. Liberals are open. Leftists have never been open. They're totalitarian. Let it be clear. Let the truth be declared. We have an agenda, and it is not the free conduit of ideas on the internet. It is to promote our progressive agenda. That too would be a victory.
I think for some conservatives there is this conflict of, well, we are for the private sector being able to do what they want to do. But to Dennis's point, they have held themselves out to be the virtual public square. And they are now the ticket takers saying who can come in and who cannot come in, and have sought a monopoly, essentially, to do that. And so as they are holding themselves out to be the virtual public square, it needs to be open to all ideas. And America is only strong, and America can only prosper when we have a free flow and free exchange of ideas. We've lost civility in our country, there's no question about it. We are a divided nation, but silencing one half of America is not going to bring peace, and it is not going to bring America together. It will only further divide America by repressing half of America in the thoughts and the expressions that they have. A very, very dangerous route for Americans to go.
And as Dennis said, there are legal precedents upon which we can build that case, and since there are, we must. And I think we have to take Sheryl Sandberg's opinion very seriously. She said, when thinking about, and she disagreed with Twitter in their early decision to remove Marsha Blackburn's video. She said, when thinking about political speech, ads are really important. Should divisive or political issue ads run? Our Facebook answer is yes, because when you cut off speech for one person, you cut off speech for all people. The content is really important, but so are the ads. Her ability to get that message out, Marsha, does depend on having access to ads, which is why we allow issue-based ads even when they're hard. I think the responsibility of an open platform is to let people express themselves.
The YouTube position essentially is, as a private company, I can do commerce with anybody, whomever I want. Notice how it doesn't work both ways. If you're a cake baker and somebody walks into your shop and pronounces himself to be gay and wants you to bake a cake for a gay wedding, you can't decide that you want to ignore that commerce. You're going to be gone after by the government. It's remarkable. Free enterprise works one way, not the other way.
By the way, it's worth noting on that, that's a great point, as usual. By the way, Larry's made a PragerU video, and you would love it.
One of them has been censored, hasn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Which one was it?
I don't remember, because I don't know the 40 by heart. But you could go and see our petition, you'll see the 40. So, by the way, there's an automatic, we know this beforehand. Sometimes it's a real puzzle why they put some of our videos on the restricted list. But here is a given. It's very telling about what animates the left. If the video celebrates America or celebrates Israel, it is immediately put on the restricted list. That really gives you an idea of whom they truly loathe, America and Israel. And that, by the way, I think that there are transcendent reasons for that, but that's not the point here. I just want to make the point on the wedding cake. Those, I think a lot of you know, but everyone should know this. They had been baking for gay customers their whole lives. It is a non-issue to these people to bake for people who are gay or whatever they might be. It was to celebrate something they cannot believe in, and that is the marriage of two people of the same sex. They were asked to bake a cake for an event, not a person. So if you ever are confronted with this, oh, it's bigotry, well, wait a minute. Does a Jew have to bake an event for people who are having an event to honor Khomeini's call to destroy Israel? Does a Jewish baker have to bake an event? And that's now, I'm not comparing a gay wedding to destroying Israel. I am only comparing when people have a principle. It is not about the individual, it is about the event. And that is an important point for all of us who fight this fight to be aware of.
I want to talk about endgame and then solutions. What are some action points that we can take? But what is the ultimate end game here? What does America look like if this organization, if national religious broadcasters, if other patriots do not take a stand? You know, just the other day, we had stories about a school banning To Kill a Mockingbird. They're banning The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. 2 days ago, I did a story at Fox News where the atheists want a children's Bible removed from a public school library. What are we looking at if we don't do anything, if we don't take a stand?
Can I just say, get some dimensions of how difficult this is going to be. There's a book called Left Turn, written by a professor who now teaches at George Mason University. He was at UCLA, but found that his positions were not particularly well received by his colleagues, and so he went to George Mason, where he is now. The book is called Left Turn. Of the top 20 sources of news information, only 2 of them are non-liberal: Washington Times and the Fox News Report with Bret Baier. Outside of that, everything else is New York Times, LA Times, CNN, MSNBC, all the major sources. But he was the first person to try to quantify what conservatives would call the damage done by the left-wing media. It's one thing to whine about it and complain about it and point out instances where there's blatant bias. It's another thing to say, what does this really mean in terms of how people vote? How does the media influence how people vote? And there are only a handful of cities that have 2 major newspapers. One of them is Washington, D.C. The Washington Times is right-wing. The Washington Post is left-wing. They found houses that never subscribed to the Times and offered them free subscriptions. They found houses that never subscribed to the Post, offered them free subscriptions to find out, after they had read these papers for a period of time, would it change their voting patterns? And it did. Conclusion: if the media were truly fair and balanced, if people really got about half their media from conservative sources and half their media from liberal sources, the average state would vote the way Texas does, which is 8 to 10 points in favor of the Republican. This is the impact of the left-wing media on how people think, how people reason, and how people vote.
Well, I think the consequences are profound for our profoundest liberties. If we have no way to speak to the people and organize and vote and pass laws that will protect our most basic freedoms, then we lose our basic freedoms. We become another nation. The Constitution looks nothing like it did when it was drafted. It is really that dramatic. It is that drastic. That's it.
I know as Christians, we're often put in this position where you're not supposed to be a part of conflict. You're supposed to just get along with everybody. And I believe that is what we should pursue. Full disclosure, I'm a Marine veteran. I was a police officer for 10 years. I understand what the real world is like.
Right.
Semper Fi. I want to say this, though. Jesus understood and acted on the fact that there are things that are bigger than ourselves. Now, you and I, we can be happy. We can go about our freedoms in terms of in our home teaching our children. We know the truth. We can live with that truth. But what about all those that have yet to hear the truth? Those that you are responsible for communicating the truth to as religious broadcasters. You see, Jesus, when he went into the temple and overturned the tables, it wasn't because he was offended. It was because God was offended and a greater truth was at stake. And so there is a time for righteous indignation. And I believe that where we are in America today is a time for righteous indignation. It is time for us to turn the tables over on the leftists and take a stand for truth. You have a tremendous opportunity right now as a religious broadcaster because so many Americans are turning away from what has been exposed as the fake news. We have a very bifurcated system now of information and news. You can get wherever you want to get it. You've got different options. People are looking for news. Christians, evangelicals are looking increasingly to you for news and information. Tell them how to vote, what's happening. As Marcia pointed out earlier, you're not hearing the good things that are happening in Washington, D.C., and there's a reason for that. The media wants evangelicals to be discouraged, depressed, therefore they won't turn out and vote when the opportunity comes. You have an opportunity. I would again encourage you to seize the moment, take the opportunity to proclaim truth and take on the left. As Marjorie was saying, there are times when we got to team up, support those who are going to court to take the left on, and band together for the freedom of speech, which truly is at stake in this day.
Let me just, if I may, I'm already late. I have to go to do my radio show. I just want to add one thing to what you were just saying. That was really important, Tony. I wrote a column that comes out each week at Town Hall, National Review, American Greatness, Investors Business Daily. I'm only mentioning the names so you'll understand it's normative, conservative, and it's red. Just 2 weeks ago, I wrote a column in defense of evangelicals who support Donald Trump. And my point is not to politicize the discussion, though obviously it's fine to do so here. This is not a problem. But it's not that. It's that I want you to understand that the attacks that even evangelicals are making on evangelicals, you're giving Christianity a terrible name. You are hypocrites. Nobody is going to call themselves an evangelical again. USA Today publishes that stuff. New York Times publishes that stuff. You see that everywhere. So I just want to say in a nutshell, you should see the article because it's much longer than what I can say right now. There is a reason that most religious Jews, that is Orthodox Jews, and most Orthodox small o Christians support the president. It is not because they are fans of his tweets or his past behavior or the sexual conduct that he is charged with. It is because they take the Bible seriously. That's the irony. The more religious the Christian, the more wisdom he gets, and the more Orthodox the Jew, the more wisdom he gets from the Bible. I am a Bible-believing Jew, all right? I am. In fact, I just want to say the first volume of my commentary on the Torah is coming out. It's called The Rational Bible. and it's coming out with Regnery on April 2nd, now a month from tomorrow. And it is an attempt to use reason to convince people that this is the wisest book and indeed a divine book. It's a lifelong task, but I get my wisdom from that book. God used a man who makes Donald Trump look like Mother Teresa, King David. King David not only committed adultery, King David had the husband killed, which is a very serious thing in life. He had him killed to cover up his adultery with the man's wife. God used him. He is to all of us, Christians and Jews, the ultimate ancestor of the Messiah. I mean, this is a very big deal, King David. He uses a prostitute. How come God picks, of all the people in Canaan, he picks a prostitute to save the Hebrew people, the Israelites, when they go into Canaan? Isn't there a lesson here? Yes, there's a lesson here. That when the public's good is concerned, the private sins of an individual are not the only thing to take into consideration. And that is what you know, and that is what I know. That's the only question to be asked. Is this man good for America? Is this man good? Is up to God to decide. Is this man good for America? Is up for me to decide. That is the only question with a politician. Jimmy Carter was probably faithful every day of his marriage. He taught Bible school, Sunday school. He was a terrible president. He hurt this country. I am sure that Barack Obama has never committed adultery. I have no doubt about it. He did more damage to this country than any president in the history of the United States of America. The people who crap on you are fools. They don't understand what matters. Keep strong.
Well said. Thanks, Dennis. Dennis Prager,
and
ladies
Dennis
and gentlemen.
Prager drops the mic. You know, the power of persuasiveness and giving facts and logic and reason, this is what we all do. Malcolm X said, "I'm for the truth no matter who's telling it." I've been on the air for maybe about a year and a half, and for the first few weeks I was on, almost every other call was calling me an Uncle Tom and a sellout, and how could you be in bed with the Republican Party? But little by little, I got fewer calls like that. One day I'm walking down the street. I've been on the air now about 2 years. A couple of black guys were sitting on a fence smoking cigarettes. "Larry Elder, come over here. I hate you, and I love you. I couldn't stand you at first. Let me tell you something. You're like castor oil. It don't taste good going down, but it's good for you. You keep it up."
Yeah, I don't think one voice crying out in the wilderness, John the Baptist, ever checked with a lawyer before he spoke out. He just spoke. He said the truth, and then we figured out how to, and then it was figured out how to back it up. I think the hero came along and did that.
All right, real quick, let's talk, and this will be, and first I have to tell the audiences, we've got 4 professional talkers up here, but we're going to get you guys out on time. I mean, this is a miracle. I want to talk about some very practical takeaways that folks can go home and implement. You know, one of the big questions, what is the go-around? Facebook with their algorithms, limiting the numbers of people that read material. I know for us you know, on our show at Fox, we've reverted back. We've gone old school. We've really gone after the newsletter as a way to get our information directly to the people. But what are some takeaways, some practical things people can do to fight back? We'll start with Marjorie.
Well, one thing I think is, and I know you do this, Tony, as well, is just being vigilant and taking on all the social media whenever they attempt to censor your voice. That seems like an obvious thing, but it is easy to get in that trap of the most urgent getting in the way of the important and thinking this is a corporate decision, okay, well, whatever. Well, we can't think like that. I also believe that what you just mentioned, Todd, was the reason. I really think that populist conservatism began with Sarah Palin, and the way she got on the map was to do exactly the type of behavior that you just described, and that is to really go over the heads of all the traditional communicators, all the people that have a filter who will filter you out. You go over their heads and you speak directly to the people. At the Susan B. Anthony list, we literally do that by going to this election 2 million homes in battleground states to actually talk to humans about what the consequences are of this election, of this U.S. Senate. So there's the person-to-person, there's going over the head with your own personal newsletter. Now they'll find a way to, I'm sure, get in the way of Fox's newsletter at some point, and ours as well. But it takes vigilance, and also, the last thing I'll say is true brothers and sisters in Christ will band together, putting our personal missions even aside for a little while, to make sure that we have fought it to the Supreme Court and back and beyond, and on our knees the entire time when we see an opportunity. And I think we need to be looking for this opportunity together.
Well said. Larry.
Well, the good news is that in today's media era, it's easier and easier to make your own content and get it out to people. And that is what I'm sensing in this whole time I've been here. All the people coming up to me talking about the movie they've made, the video they've made, the newsletter that they have, the podcast that they have, more and more people getting out making their own stuff. That's the way to combat this. I don't know why there isn't a conservative YouTube channel. I don't know why entrepreneurs have not banded together to put something together. I'm assuming sometime, at some point, somebody's going to do that. But there's no reason why we can't band together and make sure that we have our own news outlet so that people can access what our message is as readily as left-wing people can access their message.
Just echoing what was said, but in a practical sense, we do need to band together when it's kind of like Nehemiah when he was rebuilding the wall. He said, all right, I want you to build the house and build the wall in front of your house. But when you hear the sound of the shofar, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, run to the battle. And I think when you hear a conservative organization, a conservative individual that has been targeted, has been flagged, run to the sound of the trumpet collectively. As we put our voices, our platforms together, we can make a difference. We've seen it time and time again. When we flood the zone, when we stand together, we are an overwhelming number. And so let us stand together, run to the sound of the battle. Don't run from it. And then secondly, the very, very important point there that Todd and Marjorie brought up about while we flock to the new media, don't forget the old new media. Okay? We don't want to put all of our troops and all of our communication in one area that all of a sudden is targeted by the left, and we're left without a communication tool. So keep all the platforms moving. Resurrect the newsletters if you don't have them. Use the email that's old, new communication tools. Use the social media. But let's not get ourselves into a position where we lose we're only using one communication tool and we use it. Make sure we're backing up our broadcast with other forms. Let's flood every zone with our message and use every opportunity we have. And let's do this. Let's not think that we have forever. I'm going to tell you, the window is very narrow for us, I believe, to rebuild, restore, and to reach. Let's run. This is not a marathon. It's a sprint. Let's do our very best.
And Tony, I think but for conservative outlets, but for papers like the Washington Times, but for conservative sites like the Daily Caller, like some of the other ones, I don't think the miracle of Donald Trump would have happened. And it was a miracle. This is a man who had never run for office, never held any government position, never served in the military. I think there were 2 newspapers in the whole country that endorsed him. I think 1 or 2 members of Congress endorsed him, including Jeff Sessions. He was outspent by Hillary substantially, and he still won. I think it's a miracle.
I think you're absolutely right, Larry. It is a miracle, but let me add to that. Christian radio and television played an irreplaceable role in the president's success and will continue to play a role in the reformation of America. You must be willing to take on these issues and talk about them. Christians are looking for sources of information. Yes, they want to hear great music. Yes, they want to be blessed. They want worship music. They want to be entertained. But they also want to know the truth. Find a way to communicate truth in your formats, whatever it might be.
I think a concrete example just occurred right before we walked out here. I was talking to Dick Bott, and this is not a way of promoting what we're doing in Missouri. It is a great example, but there's a really important Senate race. You from Missouri already know this, in defeating Claire McCaskill, pretender to the feminist throne. She is a horrible opponent of the right to life. In Missouri, we have a great chance to take back that Senate seat. And talking to Dick Bott, who's got radio stations all over Missouri, it's the kind of partnership, and I know you do as well, the kind of partnership that among us, that takes a little bit of time. It takes some conversations and thinking creatively, but it does do exactly what we were describing before, which is does not necessarily depend upon all of the mainstream or new mainstream areas of social media.
And to that point, Fox News, we partnered with Bott Radio Network, American Family Radio, to get those culture war stories and information directly to the people. And those are the opportunities where we can work together to make a difference. We've got to be the voice here. We've got to get those stories. We've got to be able to tell those stories. Our time has come to a close. I want to thank Marjorie and Tony and Larry and Dennis for great information. Please give them a round of applause.